Hi guys, welcome back, and welcome back to my channel. And I am overjoyed to welcome back Benebell. When?
Hi, Joey. I'm so glad to be back. I would be here all the time if I could. I would completely stalk you.
I would be terrified if she stole me. No, I'm kidding. So
I'm a good stalker. I'm a very good stalker.
That's worse.
I'll cook for you. I'll cook you food. I'm a cooking stalker.
I'm sure everybody here knows who Benebell is, but just in case you do not, where have you been? Come out from under your rock. So Benebell is the author of the Holistic Tarot, the Tao of Craft, and Spirit Keeper's Tarot deck. That was the latest one, wasn't it? The Spirit Keeper.
Yeah.
Oh, so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I remember looking and seeing, this is completely off topic, I don't care. But I remember seeing all the beautiful artwork and the archetypes of like the warrior. Was it the queens that were warriors? And
Yeah.
I loved that about it. How did that go for you? It seemed to be really, really popular and do really well.
Well, it was more for me, and then a lot of people pressured me to publish it, so I published it. So that's why it's a limited edition. I only sold the first edition, 1,000 copies, the second edition, 2,000, and that was it. That was the end of that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. Deeply spiritual. I know that's a weird generic thing to say. Everyone says that, but it really was.
And just in case you're not sure why I'm setting it up this way, apart from honoring Benebell's incredible achievements, which are vast and many, it's just to sort of put out there that Benebell and myself are creators of spiritual content here on YouTube and all over the place, in blogs, in books, in tarot courses and decks, and all sorts of Benebell's everywhere.
And Joey's everywhere too.
Yeah. And so we are people that are, I don't even know how you would describe us, at the front lines of online digital spirituality or something like that. Would that make sense?
You've been here much longer than I have, because I've been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. Way before Holistic Tarot even came out, I was already following your YouTube channel. So you're definitely on the front lines. I kind of like scurried up a little bit at the back end.
I don't think that's true. I don't think she scurried at all. I think she launched onto the scene like, hello world, here I am. So today we're actually going to be talking about negativity online, and I was thrilled that Benebell agreed to come chat with me about this topic. And because we are online, because we are on the fore, making content, pouring our hearts out, we know what it's like on the flip side of that too. So we're going to discuss that today. We're going to look at some ways of which it affects us as people, and perhaps how it's affected other people around us, as well as ways to deal with it, and hopefully help you guys out if you are struggling right now, because we're all very quarantined to the screen right now. So we might be finding that we're spending more time online, and then we're kind of at more risk of the negativity online, I guess, because it's much easier to be mean behind a screen. So I'm going to ask you just flat out, Benebell, so what experience do you think kind of really stuck with you that was a negative one online?
There's been so many. I think a while ago, actually, I think I said something about how I did tarot. It was one of those really stupid things that everyone does their own way. You do tarot your own way, right? And you talked about how you did it. And I guess somebody in the comments section disagreed with me and said, and it was a male, and he said, I wish I could punch you in the face so you would stop talking. And I think that's a pretty strong one. There have been a lot that I can't even say, in this video, because I think if you're an Asian female, this is a really sad fact. If you're an Asian female and your face is out there, you just sort of inadvertently attract a particular gaze. And I think there are certain comments that I get that are toward the fact I'm an Asian female that can be really, I don't know how to describe it, but it's so unsettling. And people say, oh, just ignore it. I'm like, I don't know. As a woman, it's extremely difficult to ignore. I don't know. When people invade your privacy in that way, even if it's just words, it's really hard to ignore. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I was just going to say, in response to what you said, I know that there is this very vile racism that's happening right now in the world, particularly towards Asian people. And one of the people I dearly love in the world has Asian descent, and she's getting very worried about the current situation that's going on. And I don't think that people are, I don't know how cognizant people are when they are being, just how much of an effect on people's lives it has when they make stupid memes online, which are basically racist in undertone, or they come at people with racist derogatory comments. And I'm whiter than white bread, right? So I don't get very many of, I'll get xenophobic comments. How dare you, English bitch, is one that stuck out. And I'm like, well, actually, if we go down my DNA chart, there's not very much English in me, but okay. But it's not the same thing, obviously. It's just a little bit of that xenophobic hate that I've seen over the years. But it's just, we can talk about the woman stuff for sure in a bit, but I really do just want to, like, honor what you go through and what other people go through when they are confronted with racist crap online, because it's a whole topic unto itself. And I just want to honor that for you for a minute. What would you advise other people who are online in that situation?
In terms of specifically racist comments toward Asians, this is really hard because I think it depends on your experiences, and I think this straight, like your emotional strength, not in a negative way, like, oh, you're not smart, you're not strong if you are vulnerable to it. It's more like it's just how you were raised. I think for me, weirdly enough, I have a very thin skin to other types of negativity, but toward racism, I don't know why, but I have a thicker skin when it comes to blatantly racist remarks. And this is a very sad reality. I think it's because I've experienced it from a very young age. So I've had to deal with racist remarks since I was like, 5, 6, since kindergarten. And so I think over the years, you either learn to survive and grow a thick skin with it, or you do fall prey to it. So for me, I'm a little thicker skinned about racist remarks. I don't really have much comforting words to say in terms of people experiencing it right now.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I can think to suggest for people who witness it is not to let it pass. Like, don't laugh at it. Don't like excuse it. Don't like if you're in a position, basically if you're in more of a privileged position like I am, and you see that happen, it is kind of a responsibility to be like, that's not okay. It's not funny. It's not okay.
Yeah, and I definitely want to say that too. I think just from my vantage point in terms of having support from allies, you can't dismiss or underestimate how important and valuable and grateful, people of color are. And I know there's a lot of talk about who has the right to speak. I always feel like the more, like when you speak up for people who otherwise feel uncomfortable speaking up, they're secretly so grateful, and so I think lending your strength in that way is incredibly important, especially right now.
Yeah, I think the line for me with that one, for me personally at least, is there's a difference between kind of explaining or like responding on behalf of someone if they're comfortable enough to speak up. But you can usually tell in a situation if somebody is feeling very uncomfortable and very alone, and you have the opportunity to get in the way of that, then get in the way of that is where I usually stand with that. It's a very difficult thing, obviously. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's how I feel about it anyway.
Yeah, and I think I can remember every single instance from childhood when somebody stood in front of me to shield me, and so I think you don't realize just what the impact you have on other people are when you do take the initiative to shield someone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So from a woman's perspective, this one I can definitely talk about all the negativity I've had over the years. Well, what stands out? Being told that I'm a simple, stupid little woman, so I should shut up in the occult circles is my favorite. There are some people in the occult males in the occult, shall we say, who don't like women. Flat out don't like women being there. They don't want women speaking. And so you'll get threatened with, you know, the usual, the sexual violence, the rape, the insults to your body, your physical self, and your intellect, usually. So I've had all of those insulted more times than I can count. I've had someone told me I should be harpooned on the end of a whaling spear instead of on YouTube. I remember that one. That was fun. Have you come across a lot of it for being a woman?
Yeah, so again, weirdly, that's one that doesn't bother me too much, except for when it gets violent. I think when it gets violent, it gets really scary, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, I don't know how, I think every woman will feel differently, you know, but I think certain men, when they use their physical presence and are very aggressive in the public space toward you, and there's no one around you standing up for you, that can get very scary as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's all on the internet, I get that, but there's something, I hate using the word trigger because people overuse the word, but I can't think of a better word right now, but it is triggering when they do use their physical presence. You know what I'm talking about? I've seen that happen. I think it's also more of a subconscious thing. I find that women occultists have to even any female, actually I would say female presenting, any female presenting occultist has to overprove and overcompensate to be taken seriously. Mm-hmm. If you don't overcompensate, you will find yourself not being taken seriously on an intellectual or scholarly level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I found that quite often there's a sort of push to make you fill a niche as well. So a lot of the female occultists will talk about like the sex magic and things like that, because then that's a niche that it's almost like they're allowed to fit in, which is kind of sad. I have noticed that about that's more of the occult side. When you get into the more pagan side, obviously pagan centric stuff tends to be more female dominated for whatever reason. It just kind of is. It's not that guys aren't there. We have some lovely guys there, but it does tend to be female dominated in the more pagan side of things. But yeah, wow. So I had a thought and it's completely gone out of my head now. So okay, so Benebell is probably one of the most intellectual people I know. She's like a planet with a brain. It's like a planet brain. It's massive. And you are just putting out content which is incredible. Have you found that there's been a resistance, like a negative resistance to you showcasing just how incredibly intellectual you are within these spheres? Have you found that had a negative backlash as a presentation of intelligence?
I've really struggled with that. So it's because I think some of the things people say are true, and I don't know what to do. Like, for example, I do speak there. I feel like I'm really being myself, you know? And then there are a couple of times when I was completely just being myself. James, my husband, was there. He would later tell me, you know, in a very constructive, critical way, like, you know, you use words most people don't understand. The way you talk, it comes across as you're looking down on people. So he has said this to me. He goes, you can't talk down your nose at people, or you can't have that kind of an attitude. But then I don't know, there's a disconnect, because from my vantage point, I don't feel like I'm doing that. And then you do something like, I don't know, how do you deal with that? And then so when he tells me that, and I know that there is a kernel of truth to how I might be presenting, even if it's in an unaware way, when you hear people say that on the internet about you, it does hurt, because you don't know how to change, right? Because I don't think I'm doing that. At least I'm most definitely not intentionally trying to do that. And then I just don't know how to navigate the line. You know, that some people say, oh, I talk down on people if I try to use easier words, and they say, oh, she thinks she's better than us if I try to speak from an intellectual. Like, I don't know how to navigate that line. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I struggle with this too for a variety of reasons. So one of the ways that I struggle with this is actually my accent. So people think that because of my accent, I'm talking down to people, or that I'm talking as an authority immediately, and I'm unapproachable, and I like, I don't, there's this whole thing where apparently I come off as very cold and sort of disdaining towards people, and I'm like, what? I'm just doing me. I'm like, I sing in stupid songs in videos. How am I like talking down at people? And it's the accent and the accent has come under fire many times over the years, and that is just my voice. And I've even been accused of faking my accent. And that one was interesting. That one stayed with me because it was so ridiculous. And I was like, there's 2,000 videos on this channel. That's some commitment to a fake accent. What's my real accent then? Like, you know, it just drops and there's like broad London underneath or something. I don't know.
You know, if I can respond to that, because I am familiar with your work. So if I can respond to that, I think people they say it's the comment, they say it's the accent because that's the most visible, it's the easiest thing to hang on to. But what it actually is, what they can't articulate, and this I think is where we have the common denominator that we share. It's when you talk about certain topics that you know a lot about, I noticed that you kind of put on an air where you are very confident. You know what you're talking about, so you convey confidence in the material that you're presenting. And I think for some reason, even today, subconsciously, that rubs people the wrong way when you're female presenting, and then you speak or convey information in a very confident way, right? And I feel like, I don't know if this is true, but I do believe that if I looked like a man, if I were a man and I didn't change anything else, I used the same words, I wrote the same way, I spoke the same way, I wouldn't get the same, oh, she puts me off comments that I get now because I'm female.
Yeah. I guess it's because there is so much I'm going to be controversial now, but there's a lot of indoctrination in society, which is that women are supposed to be softer and more caring and less intellectual than men, and they're not supposed to get fired up and passionate and almost like aggressive, but it's not really aggressive in my mind, it's just passionate, and there's a disconnect there. So maybe it's that kind of conditioning that women are supposed to be more placid somehow and more sort of receptive, and when we're more aggressive, more confident, then we're kind of pushing back against something that is so like insidious within how people have been taught gender roles throughout their lives. And that crosses cultures, that in different ways it presents itself, but that is so indoctrinated into so many cultures that women have taken the back seat, and intellectually incredibly so, like in history where women having to fight to be allowed access to the same education as men, even to like recent times. So I'm wondering how much of it is just like this kind of underbelly current thing that happens, and maybe people aren't fully conscious of it, and it just comes up in these weird ways, like, oh, she puts me off, and oh, she's aggressive, and oh, she looks down on me. And you think about it, it's like, how can you be looking down on someone through the internet who you've created something for? I can't understand where you're getting that from, unless it's not coming from where you think it is in that sort of way.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to name names, but I can definitely think immediately off the top of my head, male occult writers who I would say the tone of their writing and what they put out there is very similar to the tone and the content that I put out there. But I've never heard anyone say that those male scholars look down their noses at people, or they're off-putting, or they grate on people's nerves, or they're verbose. And I think that's really interesting, where I can think, the tone, the style, very, very similar, but they don't get the same remarks that I get. Yeah.
And I don't know that I can think of one good way to like help other people who come into this contact with this kind of negativity. I think the only thing I can think of saying to people is just continue to be who you are, and don't allow that to stop you from doing what it is that you love doing. Because if we're here for a reason, if we're here to create what we love, if we're here to change the world one video at a time, who knows, then the world needs your voice. And if that is the problem, that tone is in society, then we need more people pushing back against that, and not allowing that to sort of become correct, I guess.
You know, I think it's tough. This actually reminds me of, so I know I think in 2017, 2018, I was experiencing a lot of negativity, and I actually went quiet and I receded into the background for a little while just to give myself some time off. But I remember at the time, it wasn't just me. There was something going on in the air. A lot of content creators were getting a lot of flack online. And what they did was they stopped putting out free content. They went on Patreon. They only did paid online courses. They put up paywalls, but they were like, you know what, fuck this. You know, if you don't, if I can't even get that feedback in some way, that positive, interaction with people, why am I spending all of this time putting out free content? It doesn't make any sense. Whereas I think if it's purely a business transaction, if there's quote unquote negativity, I don't think you mind as much. And I think that's what people don't understand, because you understand it's a business transaction. When it's free content and you're still you feel underappreciated, what are you going to do? You're going to stop putting out free content. So I'm wondering, like, is that my next step? Is my next step to say, well, I'm going to stop putting out free content? And how do you navigate that line? I know, did you go on Patreon a couple years back?
I have been, yeah.
What was your reason for that? And how do you, how did you navigate that free content versus paywall? And why did you go that route?
I had quite a lot of negativity over the years when it came to YouTube. One thing we haven't touched on that did happen to me a couple of years is I had one or two people get very stalkery on YouTube. Like, we joke about it, but it can be very disconcerting. And there is a weird line where people, they kind of give you a sort of semi-celebrity status because you're on a screen, right? And you're talking and you're removed from them. But you're obviously not a celebrity. So it's not like you're known by hundreds well, you might be known by hundreds of thousands of people at this point, who knows? But it's not the same. So you don't have the same level of protections and things. So all it takes is for one or two people who get a little bit crazy, a little bit much, and you're in a position where you don't feel safe. And so there was an element of that for me on Patreon. There was also looking for ways to diversify just financially to survive, because you had been doing free content for a very long time on YouTube. My circumstances changed. I needed to be, supporting myself better and be more independent, and Patreon was one of the ways I did that. And one of the ways I navigate Patreon versus free content now is that there is some content on Patreon which is entirely for patrons, and no one else ever sees that unless you've paid on there. There is some content which is early access for patrons, so they get it first, and then maybe a month later it goes up on YouTube, and then it's free for everybody. So I sort of mix and match that, so the content gets more use out of it than it would if it wasn't going on YouTube. But the people and they get all sorts of bonuses on Patreon. It's not just videos on there. There's a lot of ranging from things like physical products to consultations, so FaceTime, interactions, conversations, and all that sort of thing on Patreon. So that's how I manage that. And I have to say, apart from one outstanding incident of negativity, Patreon has been positive for 2 years completely.
See, that's what I've heard from people. The only thing is, some content creators do receive an initial backlash when you've been giving out so much free, generous content for a while. When that content creator suddenly puts up a paywall because they need to set boundaries, they need to pay bills, whatever the reasons are, they need to sort of filter the negativity. They get a lot of backlash for asking for the slightest, tiniest bits of money for what they're doing. It's kind of insane. But other than that, I do find a lot of them have positive things to say about a paywall. I mean, I think it's hard. I don't know what I want to do going forward, but that seems like the only option for content creators if you want to diminish or filter the negativity. And you were saying the stalkers on YouTube, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
If you go through the comments sections of multiple videos, you're going to find that to be a truism for any content creator. I've seen it on, it's not just me, I've seen it on my friends' channels as well.
Yeah.
If you scroll through the content, if you go through the comment section, just 3 or 4 or 5 videos, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, this, oh my God, like female content creators, they all attract these types. I don't know where they come from, and I don't know how to deal with that either.
It's very, very difficult. After a certain point, you have no choice but to get the police involved, because if you get into the point where you don't feel safe, it depends where in the world they are. Obviously, it is a lot harder for someone to travel halfway across the world, which was fortunately the case for me. So there was, you know, the ocean was in the way. But after a certain point, you need to just look at your legal rights, really. And you need to, what I did was, when it was getting bad, I would respond once, which is, I don't want to hear from you again, and if you continue to do so, then I'm contacting the police. So you have clearly stated that the attention is unwelcome, you've clearly stated you don't want this. And for me, it never felt mentally well, the attention either, because some of the rants you would get didn't make sense. And you were like, you're looking for sense and there just isn't any, and it's the strangest. I can't even explain to you, because it just doesn't make sense, some of the stuff that I've been sent over the years.
No need to explain.
And you get people who are like, in one breath, they're like, you think you're the Morrigan, don't you? And I'm like, no, I'm Joey, I'm fine, but okay. And then in the next breath, they're like, you are the Morrigan. And I'm like, oh no, like, please don't do that. Like, please don't go down that road. But after a certain point, all you can do in the worst case scenarios is do that, contact the police if necessary, block anything. Now, I'm unfortunate that the stalker just keeps making new accounts and keeps sending messages to this day. So 3 or 4, 5 years later, I still get emails. So it's like, it's a new email, block, delete, carry on. And it is incredibly stressful. Like, that's like negativity, like ramped up to the next level, because that will ruin my whole day when I get that. Because you're just like, I thought this was over with, and for no reason other than well, in that case, it was because my social status had changed. I'd gone from in a relationship to not. So they'd been stalking and following and watching me, and knew the minute that happened. And then I got an email, and I was just like,
What's your response to people when you get, so here's what we all experience, right? You have, let's say, 5 or 10 really positive, supportive comments, people who are really supportive of you. And then one that just really is extremely hostile and negative. And I think every content creator will agree that it's terrible, it's weird math, where that one comment will ruin your day and make you forget the 10 positive, supportive, kind remarks that you receive. And so when that happens, because that's a reality, you can't say that that's not true, that happens, right? If you're honest. But then when people say, oh, well, Joey, you shouldn't be like that. Think about all the positive comments that you get. Why would you let one comment ruin your day? That's your fault. You're the one who's inviting in that, like, just focus on the positive. What's your response to that?
I don't believe that just focusing on the positives is ever an answer. So what I think has, and this has happened to me many times over the years, and I didn't know what to do with any of it for a very long time. And what I realized was that if the comment is bothering, the negative comment is bothering me that much, it might be poking one of my shadows. So it might be something that deep down I'm worried about, that, or maybe I believe it on some level, or, you know, it could be that you don't think that you are good enough, or you don't think that you came across right in this video, or you're worried that you didn't present well, or you're worried that someone else knows better than you. You feel like, you know, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of shadows that we carry around with us about content and things that when we're creating it. or you don't think you looked good in a particular video, whatever it is. And then that negative comment comes in and it's like a roundhouse punch in the face because you already deep down have a worry about it. So the positive comments are great, but they're more like a balm on top of the issue for whatever it is that's harboring underneath. And then when that negative comment it comes in, it like gets right down into that nerve and sets off that thing. So for me, it's like, okay, well, we can't stop the fact the comment happened. So how about we rewrite the comment in our head as a positive criticism, something we can use, and look at where we think the problem with the video or the content or whatever it was. We take the power back. So, all right, so if I felt there was something wrong with this somewhere, what did I think was wrong with it? And so if that comment has hit my nerve because I deep down I'm ashamed of something, or I'm embarrassed about something, or I didn't quite feel that I was up to par on something, then just do better next time. And take that as something that you can then alchemize into something better for yourself. And it can be incredibly hard, especially if the comments are something that you can't change very easily. Like when it's weight related for me, which is a ongoing process of trying to lose weight. Like I can't wake up tomorrow and boom, sorted. So that's an ongoing thing for me. So that's really difficult to deal with. And you know, physical stuff, we don't want to take that on board, because that's just people being mean. But if there is something in that comment that has really bothered you because you think there's something truthful in it, then take that and make it your own. That's how I would deal with it.
I would 1,000,000% agree with you that the reason the one comment gets under your skin is because it does hit a shadow. So there's a couple things I want to say about that. One, I think people don't realize, so shadow work, why do some people say shadow work is dangerous, right? It's dangerous because it has to be navigated at a pace that the person is ready for, is comfortable with. Like, it's something you really need to be in control of at every single baby step. And what some of these really negative comments do is they throw you off your pacing. And that's why, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's why it's mentally and psychologically destructive. Why we talk about the psychology of trolling is because that's exactly what's happening. I think when I receive a negative comment that doesn't hit my shadow, I don't really, like I said, thick skin, I don't get bothered by it. It's always when it hits your shadow. But the thing is, you need to be the one in control. So I would say to the people who are trolling, I think it's extremely unempathetic. Like, I don't think they realize how evil it is. It's evil because you're actually being destructive towards somebody else's pacing when it comes to their own shadow work and what they're working through. You really need to let people work through things themselves. If they already know, I'm pretty sure whatever you have to say, they already know about themselves, right? And they're working through it. And if they don't know, it's not your place to tell them. So I never understood that. And the other thing, you know, I can't remember what was the other thing that I wanted to say, but I guess it's just that I forgot. Anyway, if it comes back to me, I'll say it. But.
Yeah. I think there's two kinds of those negative comments that people do. I think sometimes people want to hurt people, and that's the worst kind. Like when people go out of their way because they just want attention, they want to hurt that person, they feel angry at that person for whatever reason. And half the time those reasons don't even make any sense. It might be nothing to do with the person that they're angry at. It's not really what's going on. But sometimes people say these comments and they think they're helping, or they don't mean to be destructive, I think, in their heads as they're typing. Or they think how they would react to something is how everybody is going to react to something. And text isn't nuanced, for starters, so it can be very easy to misunderstand somebody via text and things like that anyway. So I would just caution people, like, be careful what it is that you're saying and ask yourself if it's necessary and is it kind.
I think another thing that you know, has come up. This is what the negativity, like why I kind of want to go the path of, you know, being less visible. Some of the negative comments, it's not toward me, like it's not a personal direct hit, but it's just negativity that I don't understand, and it just bums me out for the rest of my day. So for example, like what I was thinking about was I found a photo of the Kabbalistic tree of life from an old text, right? And I posted it, and that's all it was. It wasn't even, I wasn't even, so if you think about it, the content wasn't even about the Kabbalah. The content was about, oh, look at this cool image in this old book. And I received anti-Semitic comments to that post. And I just feel like to have to confront that level of ugliness in humanity, you know, I think that's the thing, another aspect to being online, because you have a front row seat to witnessing a lot of the ugliness in people, you know. Very recently, I posted a video that was showcasing the Pride tarot deck. And it wasn't even like, you can watch the video to tell, it had nothing to do with politics, it had nothing to do with social issues. It was literally, I found a tarot spread in this book, in this tarot deck, let's walk through this tarot spread together. Like literally that was the whole thing. And the comments were like, we should segregate the LGBTQ+I community from us. Oh, why is this political? This is just like, it's just, why is there all of this weird hatred toward any perception of the other? Like any perception of the other, we have to launch negative attacks. And even when it's not toward me, because I'm generating that content and therefore attracting these like ugly comments, it does bring down your day. Even when it's not a direct hit, it's like you have to look at the ugliness of people all day. I don't know if you have that.
I think I have phases where I think when I'm online, where sometimes I won't come across any of it, and I'll be just doing my thing and avoiding all the drama. So I was telling Benebell before we went live that I had been on TikTok, and I've recently had an issue with negativity on there, which really put me off. So I knew there was drama in the witchy community, but I've never seen it. I've heard people responding to it, but I've never personally seen it. So I'm like just making my little videos, watching the little videos that I find funny, and that's it on there. But then the other day I came across a video of a woman that I had followed, and I'd followed her because she did short clips of like how to do exercises. And I found all that quite helpful because it was quick little videos of showing you different exercises for your body, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea, because then you can fit little bits in throughout the day, right? And then I saw on one of her posts, she'd started posting about her diet because she needed to lose 10 pounds, and this girl has no 10 pounds to lose. And I was a bit like, from where? Like your feet? Like what's that? Well, there's no body fat on you. But I was like, you know, it's her body, whatever. And her diet wasn't particularly, you know, it wasn't really low. It seemed healthy. But then there was a 12-year-old in the comments asking if she could do this diet. And this woman was then advising a 12-year-old girl about losing weight. And I was just like, oh no. And it really did affect me. And that's not my content. That's just running into negativity on TikTok. My content, I can run into negativity, like the negativity you spoke of. I know that it's in my mind sometimes where I'm like, I want to make this video, but am I going to get such a load of weird backlash about it that I shouldn't make this video? And I had that recently because I wanted to talk about fake positivity in response to the coronavirus. And I was like, is everyone going to hate me and tell me I'm negative, and like, because I don't think the false positivity works? So I was umming and ahhing about whether I should even make that video. And it was very Morganic. I was at the altar and she was like, just do it.
I'm glad you did. I saw that video.
And the response to that has been incredibly positive, incredibly so. Like there have been like a lot of comments, more comments than I've seen for a while, because we were talking about this as well. Like YouTube is a bit strange right now with showing people videos. But there were a lot of comments from a lot of people saying, thank you for saying this, because I've been stressed out because all I've seen is this like shoving positivity down my throat. This is how you get through. This is the way. Chin up, be positive, blah, blah. And I feel like my world's falling apart and I can't. So it's interesting, though, that that thought, that cloud was in my head as to whether or not there would be massive amounts of backlash for speaking out on something that I felt like I needed to. So that's definitely there.
I'm so glad that you made that video, though. I think I don't really understand the false positivity in our community at all, because just think about you looking out into the world. When you're feeling bad about yourself, when you have anxiety or depression or melancholy, and you see false positivity, someone saying, "Oh, don't worry, everything's great, love and light, just do this meditation, think about your crown chakra, all will be well." Has that ever made you feel better? Like,
Nope.
It has never made anybody in this world feel better, no matter their personality. It's such a blind, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a blind, and it's such an obvious blind. I can't believe any occultist, any spiritualist who is always talking about revealing the veil, you know, unblinding yourself. When you're talking about that, how can you be so obtuse when it comes to putting on a blind? And I think when it comes to, especially what we're facing right now, the coronavirus, and how people are anxious about their financial security, they're anxious about their physical health, their loved ones, they can't see their loved ones who are, you know, in physical risk. I think you need to sit with them at their vibration. I say this all of the time. You have to start at their level, and then the two of you have to like co-agree to work toward a higher level. But you can't be like up here and be like looking down at people, which is the irony of, you know, people saying how I look down on people. Like, you can't do that false positive. If anything is looking down on people, I would say false positivity is very, very, like, you know, condescending and looking down, because it's presuming that people are so stupid that they can't lift themselves up out of their own situation, or it's their own fault that they're being negative. I think blaming people for being depressed is the most, like, it's the thing that like really irks me the most.
I recently posted on Facebook about this because I was having a moment because somebody told me I was a negative person. Somebody that should have cared about me more than just making a flippant comment like that. And I was sitting with it and I was like, because that's something I worry about being, because I'm not naturally bubbly or a perky person. I tend to be more grounded and earthy, I guess. And I do talk about a plethora of topics, and a lot of them are, you know, shadow based, a lot of them are more difficult topics. And so I really sat with, do I think I'm a negative person? And I was doing a lot of reading around responses to having been a survivor of traumatic experiences and how they come out and what they're expecting to happen around them. And I realized that it's not that I'm like negative inside of myself and I'm always negative and I always think the worst things are going to happen, because I know I don't. I know I'm ridiculously optimistic to the point where sometimes I end up getting hurt by that, because I have to be, because if I went down the other end and never believed in anything, that would be worse for me. But I realized it was a growth process that was coming out of having seen the worst things in people, and knowing what that looks like and knowing what that feels like, and not wanting to be that, but always having that gut instinct to protect yourself. And I think when it comes to talking about negativity, like, we have to look at whether or not we think, you know, have we perpetuated negativity at any given point? Because we all do it. We're human, you know, we all make the mistake and we all focus on the wrong thing, or we let it get to us too much. But I agree with the false positivity and not being helpful in any light at all. And I feel like one of the major reasons for that is people still want to sell things to people. They want to make out like they have a control over this situation that they don't have. Nobody has control over what's happening in the world right now. And that's part of why I made this video, because I was like, people who tell you that they have this all under control and they're fine, they are lying to you, because nobody does. And I thought it was better to just be honest. And sometimes I get called negative for being honest in my mind. So there is that weird crossover there for me too with negativity.
I've never thought of you as negative. I think you're truthful and candid. And I think if people want to talk about negativity, where I would define that, where I would draw the line is I think when people are openly and publicly condescending towards specific members of their own community. Like when, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're being outrightly negative toward other people in your community or putting down actual people in your community and trying to make yourself seem like you're better than the other people in your community that you're in the trenches with, that's where I would say, okay, that's negativity. But I think if you're talking about things you're experiencing that other people may be experiencing too, how's that negativity? I don't understand. That's called honesty. Last I checked, at least.
I think it's because I don't trust easily. I think that's what it is. And that's just a sum of my experiences. So I'm very, very cautious getting to know people. And some people perceive that to be negative. I guess that's what it is. But the situation that you're talking about there is actually the worst situation of negativity I ever came across in the community. It's the one time I very nearly left and never came back is when members of the Morganic community, who I at the time respected, although the main perpetrator, I didn't know who she was. I knew who the people around her were. They came for me and calling me a retard who shouldn't speak of the Morrigan ever, encouraging her followers to come bash me and bully me and call me names and all this stuff because she didn't like one of my poems.
That is rough. Like, so I think there's so many things going on there. Like, I think one, and people say this all the time in response to when they're trying to like make us feel better or trying to comfort us when we are on the receiving end of this type of negativities, they say, oh, well, on some level, even if that person realizes it or doesn't realize it, they're jealous. You know, there's an insecurity where your perspective challenges their ideologies. And then your perspective is being given validity through public reception, positivity that people are showing you, that they're not showing their ideology. And therefore, their only way to kind of make themselves feel valid again is to go after you and demean you. And people say this to me, I'm sure they said this to you, and you, on some level, you can understand that response, but it still hurts, you know. It still hurts a lot.
It was traumatic for me at the time. It took me years to be okay carrying on with talking about the Morrigan in public spaces, to be honest. And I talked to some of, you know, the bigger names in our community behind the scenes who weren't involved with Morganic stuff, but they had come across this kind of, you know, basically bullying in the community. And the best advice I ever had was from Kellyanne, and she said, you just stand for what it is that you stand for. So you talk about the Morrigan from a personal gnosis standpoint, you talk about it from devotion, you're not talking about it from purely based on what the law is, like these people were, and you just do what you're sent here to do. And that's what I focused on. It was nice, something like 3 or 4 years later, when apparently my poetry got read out in the Morganic temple. So to be a fly on that wall, that was a nice closure to that situation 3 years after it had happened. But yeah, in terms of that negativity, sometimes the only thing you can do is decide whether or not it gets to stop you. And if the answer is no, then keep going.